Why do I even bother playing these games? Why does anybody play these games? Couple of things before we get into tonight's video, right? First thing, you may have noticed by the title, I lied to you a little bit. Tonight is not Monster Hunter Part 3, and I'm sorry about that if you were looking forward to that video, but if you know anything about that series, you know that those games take a while to play through, each one of them. So it's going to take a little longer for that video, but in the meanwhile, don't worry, because I've got plenty more episodes I want to do on some really cool things, so neither one of us is going to be bored in the interim. The second thing, I feel the need to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. Tonight's topic is not something I have a whole ton of first-hand experience with. Most of the games we're going to be talking about tonight, I haven't actually really sat down and played them myself. I've more so watched other people play them. In fact, a lot of the footage you're going to see tonight is footage that I collected exclusively for this video. But it really doesn't matter, because I'm not here to review these games, I'm not here to talk about their gameplay or their subjective quality or anything like that. Instead, we're framing these games within the context of a larger conversation about the game industry on the whole, and how hard it kind of sucks right now, you know? So, before you get upset about me talking about your favorite series, please understand this. I'm not here to talk shit about these games. I'm not here to talk shit about the fans who enjoy them. I'm here to talk shit about the companies that disrespect them both.
Everybody's gone to bed and sleep battle. We're up all night instead. Games and movies are our sweet reveries. We present 3 a.m. Soliloquies.
While I'm giving disclaimers, I may as well tell you exactly what inspired this video. I watched some of Gameranx's videos. When it comes to gaming journalism, I'm really not a fan overall, and I'll save some of my more vitriolic opinions about that for another night. But Gameranx is a site whose opinions and takes and observations I actually usually rock with. And they play a lot of different games over there, not just the major new ones. So they've actually introduced me to lots of new stuff. But more to the point, not too long ago, they posted a video about the atrocious launch of Battlefield 2042, where they talked about the bad, the worse, and the absolutely awful, and what lessons could be gleaned about the gaming landscape, if any, from that astounding debacle. Donkey posted a video too, and his was a lot more sardonic, as is kinda his style where big budget games are concerned, but I'm gonna leave reviewing to the reviewers. Like I said, this video isn't about the quality of the games. It's more a general analysis of exactly why things are like this now, and what, if anything, can be done about it. The number one thing I think people often leave out of the conversation about microtransactions, broken games, day one patches, and excessive DLC is considering just how much the landscape itself has changed, especially with the advent of widespread high-quality Wi-Fi and digital gaming. Remember the PSP Go? Remember how it was download only and supposedly that was more convenient than buying UMDs? Remember how barely anyone owned it? Back then, people were still mostly interested in retail. The digital marketplace wasn't a huge thing just yet. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't experience the convenience of Wi-Fi until we were a year out from the release of the PlayStation 4. I mean, seriously. I think I've met maybe one person who owned a PSP Go. Up to that point, the majority of non-mobile games were primarily consumed as physical media. You bought a disc, a cartridge, whatever, and that was it. Compare that to today. I don't think anyone would deny the prominence of the digital space has increased tremendously to, I think, a net positive effect. It makes it easier for independent developers to get their stuff published and in front of gamers, not to mention the increased convenience for gamers themselves. And now that Wi-Fi has pretty much been refined to the point of often being just as good as wired connection, it's more dominant now than ever before. And just to prove that, compare the PSP Go to the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5 is one of the new major consoles, and it had a commercially successful release of an all-digital model. For better or worse, the wireless, digital, internet-based sphere has become fully integrated into our modern gaming experience. And you can see it everywhere, from friend lists to online leaderboards to game streaming. I mean, all of these things are literally built into all our modern games and all our modern game consoles. Now, keeping in mind this level of integration with the internet at all levels of gaming culture, let's talk about the primary issue here. Half-finished, half-assed, half-hearted games. It might not seem like a cause and effect situation at first, but if you ask me, it at least partially is. What follows is just my opinion. I first want to explain to you exactly why a glitchy, barely functional game is such an affront as opposed to just a bad game. It might seem obvious, but it's actually even worse. Another disclaimer, I personally don't encounter a ton of buggy, half-baked disasters because I don't tend to play the particular AAA titles this is often an issue with. But the degree to which this has become a part of game culture is a travesty. And we both know the usual suspects. Your EA games, your Activisions, some of your Ubisofts, FIFA, Madden, Battlefield, Battlefront, Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, all these games that get these day one patches that come out in a damn near pre-alpha state. Some of the fans are okay with waiting on a game, a released game that they paid full price for months or even years for it to be good. Can we take a step back and think about how fundamentally bizarre that is? And what's even more bizarre is that we consider this normal now. To wait for a game to get patched into being decent isn't uncommon, and people accept that, and that's insane. And to emphasize how ridiculous this is to me, let me put it into an analogy, right? Imagine you hire a contractor to repair something in your home. And he finishes, he gives you the bill, he's like, okay, I'm charging you $200 for the problem. And lo and behold, the problem's not actually fixed. So you call him up and you go, hey man, you didn't actually fix my fucking floor. There's still shit coming through it. And he goes, oh, just give it a couple months, it'll be better. And in this hypothetical, you can interpret that however you want. Maybe the adhesive hasn't set properly yet. Maybe he's gonna come back and finish the floors later. It really doesn't matter. What does matter is that you paid full price for something to get done that was then simply not done. Now, here's the disconnect. In this situation, if you're human, you'd be livid. You'd be like, I'm never hiring this guy again. Either give me my money back or do what you said you would do. And sure, $200 is a far cry from the $60 or $70 you'll pay for a game at launch. But the point I'm trying to make is, why are we giving game companies a pass for something we'd never give any other kind of company a pass for? And this is a point I've heard echoed in a lot of places, from my close friend groups to larger game journalism sites to independent gaming reviewers and commentators. You know who I think might be to blame? Bethesda. But not for the reason you probably think. Specifically, I'm talking about Oblivion and Skyrim. These are great games. Some of the most ambitious, most open-ended fantasy games ever released. And you'd be hard-pressed not to feel their influence in pretty much every open-world RPG that came after. But it's also no secret that these games, as is infamous for Bethesda, had a ton of bugs at launch. Some were benign, some were quest-breaking, but some were definitely game-breaking. But because the games were so good, past the bugs, people forgave and still forgive them. Yes, in the 10 years since launch, the game has been improved tremendously, but even these more modern versions on PS4 and Switch and whatever else still suffer from more bugs than really any other game I've played. But the thing is, every game that comes out with hella bugs is not Skyrim. Every series hasn't earned the right that The Elder Scrolls has. You know, the more I think about it, the more I feel like of the various types of media criticism, movies, music, TV, books, aside from food criticism, because that's how you keep people from getting sick. There's a great episode of Bob's Burgers on it. I feel like video game criticism is another one that can truly be a service. If somebody doesn't like a narrative, that's an opinion, and you might completely disagree. But if a game is unplayable, that is an objective truth. And in being warned not to buy it, you have been done a genuine service. The main thing I want to impress on you is that bad and unplayable are two different things. Spending money on a bad movie is unfortunate. Buying an unplayable game is literal robbery. You can get some enjoyment out of a bad movie, but how are you supposed to have fun with a game you literally cannot play? Consider this, the thing about the game that makes it unique as an observable piece of art is that it's also a functional object designed to be used to serve a tactile purpose, which is the reason that some people say that video games cannot be art, but that's another story. A game is used, not just watched, and for it to not function how it's supposed to is something that in any other space would warrant immediate refunds. Going back to my contractor example, suppose you had to pay this jackass up front, but you get back home and there has been no discernible work done. You would demand a refund, as you rightfully should, because this thing that you paid to be able to use is not in a state where you can use it the way you're supposed to be able to. Bad is one thing, but to allow someone to spend money on something unplayable should be an actual crime.
So, why is this now something we're okay with? How did this happen? Why is gaming like this? Well, there's two sides to this story, the real world of business and consumers, of production and consumption, and the digital world, which drastically impacts how business is conducted. And like we said, since the gaming industry and therefore the consumer experience has been so fundamentally changed by the digital world, we're going to talk about both.
Let's look at the consumer side first. There are myriad reasons why people buy games in an incomplete state. I think a big culprit is fan dedication to some of the longer running franchises in question, particularly Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, and Battlefield, and to a lesser extent Far Cry, which is a series I do enjoy. Amongst my casual acquaintances and close friends alike, these series have tons of diehard fans. This is another thing I don't think we talk about enough. People decry these franchises as being cookie-cutter, low-effort, having technical issues, whatever, but regardless of how you feel about them, they have the platforms they have for a reason. At some point, they were doing enough right to get people on board. There's a lot of gamers out there, like myself, who prefer non-realistic games, that try to mock COD or Battlefield fans for liking games they perceive as being vapid, tasteless, or otherwise uninspired, and that's not fair. Lots of entries in fantasy-oriented series have very similar plot lines and progressions.
Do you want me to slice you open like I did your friend? Shut the fuck up! Okay? I'm the one with the fucking dick!
As someone who doesn't participate in these franchises, someone who has no vendetta against them, I think a lot of gamers have been conditioned. Conditioned hard. And honestly, that's really sad. But when you truly, deeply love a franchise, and you've been playing it for a while, it's easy to get duped into blindly accepting it. And looking at player testimonials and YouTube Let's Play streams and stuff like that, usually it's not even that they don't see the issues. It's that their love for the franchise, and maybe their nostalgia for its glory days, compels them to ignore the problems. And at the point where expectation meets reality, where gamers take a hard look at this thing they once loved and become acutely aware of what's happening to it, an entirely separate mindset starts to form. The self-styled, shrewd, or discerning gamers who see people complain about these buggy games will then go, "Oh, see, why'd you even buy it? I knew it was gonna be bad. I gave up on the franchise a long time ago." Does that sound familiar? And if it does, take a minute to think about how sad that is for a fan of anything to become so jaded and disillusioned that they now criticize other fans for not being as jaded and disillusioned as they are. So now, not only are consumers that still have some hope in their hearts getting screwed, but there's this air of condescension towards these gamers that, at the end of the day, want the same thing we all do, to have fun.
That attitude is bullshit, and I'm not here for it. Don't act like somebody else is stupid just because they put faith in the name that they trusted and you were too smart to fall for it. Take all that contempt, all that frustration, and direct it where it actually needs to be. And besides, who among us has not been duped into buying a crappy game because it was the latest installment in a franchise we loved? This is not the video. It'll get its own video eventually. Trust me, it will. It will.
Maybe you're familiar with the idea that if you don't like the way someone treats you, you gotta speak up about it. Because the silent assent doesn't do anything but guarantee the mistreatment will happen again. And that's the problem. Silent assent. Of course, nobody wants to buy a broken game, but the fact that the broken, unimaginative games keep selling means that the game industry, which again is unique in this regard, knows it can keep churning these games out and get away with it. As System of a Down once said, the bottom line is money. Nobody gives a fuck. Why work hard and spend lots of resources on a great product that makes proportionately less money when you could throw a slapdash mess together on a yearly basis and make money hand over fist? Now, moving on to the digital side. I already spoke on the benefits of the digital marketplace, like increased visibility for indie devs, but now we gotta weigh the cost against the benefit. The cost in patches.
Now this is where you're going, whoa, 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 patches are good though. They're a quick, convenient fix for a game bug. Who wouldn't want that? Quality control has come a long way since the days of yore, when literally anybody could make anything for any console. And game developers worked hard throughout the 90s and the 2000s to refine the marketplace, which had the eventual outcome of shifting the conversation around video games from whether they were objectively playable at all to legitimate critical subjectivity. But somewhere along the way, we fell off again. Once gaming and the internet became fully integrated, people realized you no longer need to get the game right on the first try in order to get paid like you did. And so that quality control became an afterthought again. Now, some of you might say, well, games are more complex now than they were back then. They need the patches more than they did. And that's a fair defense, but that argument really only works if every game that came out now was buggy and broken.
While we're talking about digitally released extra content, and I put that in quotes because sometimes extra is actually should have been there in the first place, I want to address DLC. Now, the line between legitimacy and BS is trickier with DLC, and I think that's also part of why some gamers are so willing to accept crap. To be fair, there is a correct way to do DLC. Take Horizon, which was an amazing finished game, which they then basically released another level of with the Frozen Wilds. Or Bloodborne, another terrific game that was complete and satisfying before they put out another level with the old hunters. The key word is complete. There's a difference between a finished, polished game that you are then gifted more of, and an incomplete game that you get scammed into buying for complete price. That's like if you bought a puzzle without all the pieces. You want to talk about Mondo suckage, you want to talk about DLC that should have just been part of the game. Let's get into Final Fantasy 13 too, right? You go through this whole insane, reality-jumping, time-traveling adventure, and then after you fight the last guy, your main character literally just drops fucking dead, and the game ends, and the credits roll. You have no idea why. You have no idea what the hell is going on, and you have to pay money to see the true end of the game. And to this day, I have no idea how this game ends, and I'm not sure I ever will. If you've been here on the channel, you know that I love Square Enix, I really do. But this was a shit move. And they knew it was too, because they never did it again.
The future changed.
And while we're on the topic of Square, I want to use another one of their games, Final Fantasy 15, to point out that sometimes what you consider as finished when the game is pretty complete already is subjective. You may or may not like 15, but the game was, on the fundamental level, a playable, polished game. It told its story, its leveling and combat were fully conceived, and its world was what it promised to be. People's complaints about it were about things like gameplay and narrative, legitimate subjective criticisms, not whether or not you'd even be able to play it through all the bugs. Then there's the Royal Edition, which is the expanded version that includes features like playing as all the characters, daily challenges, and additional objectives. I played both the launch version and the Royal Edition, and honestly, at no point playing the launch version did I feel like it wasn't finished. But not everyone agrees with me on that. So where to draw the line with DLC is often up to the individual, but if it's not done right, it can be just as predatory as microtransactions, which I think we can all agree suck pretty damn hard.
The subjectivity of something like DLC, whether it's a cash grab or whether it really is just a nice little victory lap or present from developers you love, can make it tough to tell what's well-intentioned and what's really just a company holding out on you to squeeze you for more cash later on. My personal rule is, how did you feel about the game before the DLC came out, you know? Was it lacking in basic playability? Did you feel like there was anything missing from it? And if the answer to either of those latter questions is yes, then therein lies the issue with poorly done DLC and patching in general. The very ability to put these things out after the fact with the press of a button compels companies to be lazy and rush their product. And it sucks. But much like microtransactions, it's the price we pay for the convenience of the digital space.
So with the inevitability of corporate laziness in the modern gaming world, what can we do? If you ask me, the most powerful tool we have as consumers in this industry is refunds. Refunds, refunds, refunds. The refund can be the main, most important, most powerful tool in this battle going forward. And again, some people will say, just don't buy the game, but I don't think that's realistic all the time. Yes, there are reviewers, you got stuff like Gameranx's Before You Buy or Donkey to shit all over stuff, but the reality is, if you're a big fan, someone telling you it's not worth buying is probably going to fall on deaf ears. And besides blind loyalty, there's all manner of other circumstances. There's the pre-order, which couldn't possibly be more exploitative. There's the gift for someone else, either the purchaser or the recipient didn't fully know what they just wasted money on. Even game reviewers, who buy the game so they can do you a service and tell you how bad it is, have to pay for it to do that, with the exception of a select few who have custom copies sent to them. Somebody has to spend money to see the game with unbiased eyes and tell the truth about it, and in the end, the game will always make money. And rather than calling someone an idiot for buying, let's encourage people, when they buy a broken game, to fight for the refund. It's not like people are willfully screwing themselves, they're getting swindled and hypnotized. And in a way, the refund makes more of a statement than just not buying. When the money was never there, it can't be missed. But it gets yanked away, especially en masse, that's impossible not to notice.
Now, because I actually did name a couple franchises and companies that I really do love in this video, I need to tell you, the idea is not to never give these people money again. The idea is to levy the only freaking thing they understand so that they'll stop putting out shoddy shit, you know? It's like Pink Floyd said, that dollar is almighty. We as a culture have been conditioned. And nobody even cares when the newest shitty AAA juggernaut comes out because we expect that now. And that's sad as hell, you know? Even though it's the consumer's dollar, it's not the consumer's fault. We have got to stop blaming the gamers who buy this stuff, you know? Instead, we need to take a harder, more discerning look at the real root of the issue. Refunds, refunds, refunds. Now, let me take a look at this Final Fantasy XIII 2 DLC.